Hi, I'm Jerome Davis. I'm the artistic director of Burning Coal Theater Company, and we have a couple of very interesting and special guests today from the Bulldog Theater Ensemble, Akiva Fox and Marshall Botvinick. Guys, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Can we start off with you guys, because Bulldog is one of the newer companies in the Triangle. I'd love to hear you guys describe how it got started, what who you are and what your role in the company is and that sort of thing. Maybe Marshall, start first since you're up on the screen right now.
Sure. So the company was formed in the aftermath of Man Bites Dog reorganizing itself as a granting foundation organization and no longer as a theater producing organization.
Right.
And there are a lot of artists, theater artists in Durham and in the Greater Triangle area who felt kind of homeless as a result of that change. And so a bunch of us came together to see if we could figure out some way to fill the artistic void that was left when Man Bites dissolved. And I think Akiva, who's essentially our organization's de facto producer, can talk in more detail about kind of how things sort of coalesced from there, especially from an organizational standpoint.
Do you have a title, Marshall, specifically, or just one of the company members?
We're all titled as just simply ensemble members. Is that right, Akiva? I think it's. I mean, we kind of have a very horizontal structure.
Right.
So I know my title is ensemble member,
Okay.
and I think that's everyone's title.
Terrific.
Yeah, that was very deliberate from the beginning. We had a sort of come to Jesus meeting when we heard about Man Bites Dog closing, and it was a lot of the sort of Durham regulars, and particularly regulars of Man Bites Dog and companies like it in Durham that had either gone by the wayside or started to. And so we got together, and one of the things we said is we don't just want this to be another top-down company. We want it really to be a true ensemble. That's why that word is in the name of the company.
Right.
So from the beginning, the goal was, there isn't one artistic director, managing director, et cetera, et cetera. I end up doing a lot of the kind of producer role, but I think our vision for the future is to spread that around a little bit as well.
Right.
So in the end, the most important thing for us in all of this was that the void was filled. But the result of that has been we are essentially a production by production company.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these little fiefdoms. So when someone wants to do a play, they say, hey, company, I would like to do this play.
Right.
We say, hey, that sounds interesting. And then we form a little sub-company within it to produce the play.
Produce the play, yeah.
The beginning,
Primarily been, I'm sorry, say that one more time, Akiva.
So from the beginning, the goal has been that it's not overly hierarchical.
Very good. And you have primarily been producing at the Fruit in Durham, is that correct?
Almost exclusively. We did one show last year called The Talk, which we had a short run in Chapel Hill as well, but essentially the Fruit has been our home from the beginning.
Do you know how they're doing?
Performance spaces in Durham right now available.
Right. How are they doing? I imagine they've lost a lot of rentals and things like that.
They're struggling, and I think almost every venue, not just here but all over the country, because they have fixed costs, has really been struggling, and the Fruit is certainly among them. They lose a lot of revenue, not just in the arts or in the arts production they do, but they have a ton of rentals from Duke, rentals from parties, the things that keep it open for other more artistic ventures, and that's all going away for a few months, and that's really hard. So organizations like the Fruit need support in a big way right now.
We're in a similar situation. A lot of the things that weren't our own programs also have disappeared. Is there a way for people to contact the Fruit to make a contribution there to help them stay open?
Absolutely. You can go to the Fruit's website. They also have a pretty active social media presence, but they've been asking specifically for donations and support of various kinds to keep open. And that's hard because one of the reasons we started the company in the first place, and one of the reasons why Marshall and I have been advocating for more art support in Durham over the last year, is because we've been losing venues as much as we have companies. And so if those venues aren't there, where do we perform? Like we are in some ways an extremely lucky company, strange to say, because we don't have a venue, because we don't have those fixed costs, because we don't have staff. Whereas the Fruit has staff it has a mortgage to pay. And so groups like that, if we lose them, it's hard for us to produce down the road.
And Tim, who owns and manages the Fruit, has been so generous with the Greater Durham arts community. I mean, and he, as Akiva pointed out, he really has used kind of other non-arts events, especially the kind of Duke-based parties, to subsidize very, very affordable rental space for artists. And that's made our work possible in a way that it just frankly wouldn't otherwise be without his generosity and without kind of the unique business model that he has, where he kind of uses event rental space to subsidize affordable art space.
They do have parties at Duke from time to time, don't they?
Parties from other organizations, but yeah, that's one of the things that pays the bills.
So were you in the middle of something, or were you in the early stages? I know the roommate closed fairly recently. What happened? What were you doing when this whole epidemic idea started to become clear in people's minds?
Well, we got very lucky again, and I have to say there are a lot of arts organizations out there that are not nearly as lucky as we are. So we just closed in mid-February, February 16th, I think, our previous production, Orange Light, which had done very well and was a real company endeavor. And so we were in the process of getting ready for our next production, a show called Peerless, a really fun show. We were looking forward to doing it starting in mid-May. At the moment, what it looks like is happening, although no definitive decision has been made yet, is that will be pushed forward either into the summer or into the fall, depending on how it goes. But the cast and crew is still hanging on. They actually have a first read, an online first read of the show later this week. So the goal is to stay as if we are still producing it, because the plan is still to produce it. We just don't know when. We haven't really outlaid any money for that yet. We've gotten extremely lucky. If this had happened in the middle of Orange Light, we would have been out a lot of money, and we would have been in real trouble. So I really count our blessings in this regard. And it's another reason why the fact that we are production to production rather than sort of rolling production has left us a little more agile than some larger places.
Right, that's right. Well, it's not a bad model, especially when you're first starting out. So that's good. That's good news to hear. What are you looking forward to with the company? You don't have a set season in the way that some other theaters in the area do. Do you have particular projects you're working on, sort of long range things that you're thinking about right now?
Nice things is, as Marshall mentioned, we read a lot of plays, and there's some plays that we were talking about for last season potentially, but plays that are on our radar, because for the most part what we do is newer plays, so plays from the last 5-ish years in the American theater. And existing plays for the most part. Sometimes there's ensemble members who create shows, sort of like Orange Light was this year. So ultimately, like we have a roster of a few plays that we've been kicking around for a while. Some plays where we couldn't get the rights until now because there were either holds on them or they had sort of just been written and were being produced at a major production. But we have a few things we're looking at. Some of this depends on when Peerless ends up going up. If it ends up being pushed all the way into essentially the first production of our next season, that's something we're going to have to address as well. So it means we'd have, either 2 or 3 additional productions to that. We've also been hoping to do things that aren't just regular old theater productions for a while, whether it's celebrations of various kinds, reading series. That's something we had talked about for the spring, but obviously nobody's doing anything right now. So we have a lot of stuff in the hopper potentially, and our goal is to go ahead as if there is no interruption and start planning seasons, and then deal with the fallout as it goes, because we can't predict the future in that way.
We're all looking at this idea of how to push things that were supposed to happen in the spring into the summer or fall or late fall. And I guess with venues being at a premium in Durham, that's going to be a dicey, sort of a tightrope for you to walk. And are there other companies producing in Durham right now? I know that Little Green Pig closed their doors recently. Do you know of other companies that are looking for space at that time, or advocating for more public funding?
I know there's a Bartlett Theater that works in Durham, and Jamaica Holloway, who's also a company member with us, has her own separate company, Black Ops, as well, that works in Durham. The Women's Theater Festival, which always goes up in the summer, has kind of, I think, while it initially began in Raleigh, has kind of expanded out into Durham. I know The Fruit had at least one production from that festival last summer.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the companies that immediately come to mind for me. Am I leaving anyone out, Akiva?
There's a few sort of smaller companies or, folks who are kind of producing when they produce.
Right.
Sometimes sort of artist organized events as well, where it's not necessarily a formal company, but they're a group of people who want to produce a play. But again, this is one of the issues in Durham that, we were talking about before there was a crisis in the American art scene and, a lot of America, which was that, Durham was losing artists, Durham was losing companies, in part because the venues were going away and in part because that was just, the funding wasn't available or the artist didn't happen to be around or some company had come to the end of its cycle. So, our goal after this is over, in part, is to make sure that we have a Durham that is sustainable for more companies to live in. Right now, there's a real lack of producing companies.
Are we learning anything about the system, the economic system that we're living in right now, vis-a-vis the arts in particular, do you think?
Marshall, you want to get this one? Because I think this also talks about some of the stuff we've been doing in terms of arts advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
Durham City Council.
Yeah, I'll say this, that our system has not invested in sound arts organizational infrastructure. And it hasn't done that on a national level, and certainly in Durham, it hasn't done that on a local level ever. And the lack of that investment, I think, means the arts community is going to be hit harder than other sectors of the economy that at least have a long history of sustained investment that might allow them to weather this pandemic in a way that arts organizations that haven't been able to build that infrastructure just can't do. And even within how the arts are invested, I was reading this morning, one of the few things the Democrats and Republicans seem to agree on in the Senate is the Kennedy Center is going to get $25 million as part of this $2 trillion package. And look, I have nothing against the Kennedy Center. The Kennedy Center is an amazing organization. But again, arts investment tends to be concentrated in just sort of a few large, prestigious institutions, as opposed to being spread more evenly across a wide swath of organizations. In the process of our work with the Durham City Council, we discovered, 2% of arts organizations in the United States receive 57% of the arts funding in the United States. And so what does that mean?
Is that public subsidy, or do you mean, do you include in that monies raised from private donors?
That is public dollars and grant foundation dollars.
Okay, yeah. So that's a pretty shocking number. Yeah.
So yeah, what happens to the other kind of 98% of organizations without that investment? Obviously it's too early to project what things will look like in 2021 and 2022, but it's hard not to foresee a scenario in which a lot of arts organizations across all disciplines end up closing their doors as a result of this.
Right.
Not to be doomsday about it, but I don't see how it won't happen.
Well, I think the little ones are in better shape, and I use the word little not in a pejorative way, but live might be a better way of describing it. Those organizations that can shift, that aren't tied down to heavy contracts with unions and things like that. So I think you guys are in a pretty good spot there. Last question for you. Are you all healthy? Everybody in the ensemble is okay now?
That we know of. I mean,
yes.
We've tried to stay in touch, but like a lot of us have, aging parents and young kids, and that's scary as well. So there was a stay-at-home order in Durham. I think that was a good thing to do. But ultimately, like the whole point of this is it's very uncertain. It's uncertain in terms of health. It's uncertain in terms of business. And the only way around it is through it. So I think when we come out the other side of this, we just hope for the best. It's not going to be a survival of the fittest. It's going to be a survival of the luckiest. And it's a
I
great
think
way to
that's
think about
right.
it.
Yeah.
Like we count ourselves as a very lucky company right now because we can really put ourselves in amber and then thaw out on the other side. And that's lucky for us, but a lot of companies and organizations aren't going to be as lucky. And we're really going to need the city and the people of the city to help us restart. And there's other companies that are much less lucky than us that aren't going to make it. And that's scary. But ultimately, the goal is to keep our health and our safety. And then we're going to have to remake the world a little bit.
And I will say too, in Durham, both North Star and the Durham Arts Council are doing fundraising to support affected individual artists as well as arts organizations. So if folks are looking to make a contribution, in addition to visiting the Fruits website, I would suggest checking out what North Star is doing and checking out what Durham Arts Council is doing because they are creating some life wraps for
Good.
people.
Good. Yep. Very good. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us with this today. I appreciate it very much. And, break a leg is what I can mostly say. And I know you'll be back as soon as this thing passes and doing the good work that you've been doing right up until this time. Thanks for joining us.
You too, Jerry.
Thank you to you as well. And best to burning coal, Jerry.
Thanks. Cheers.